no one ever teaches you how to get out of a relationship in a healthy, loving.
It's astounding how few of us know how to do this.
I don't even. Yeah, you're the only one I know who knows how to do it. So.
I have seen the most high-level, advanced spiritual people make a total mess of, the end of a relationship.
Really?
Yeah. We just don't know how to navigate it. And I have a theory about it. I think that inside of our happily ever after myth, which kind of assumes that if the relationship ends before one or both people die, that it was a complete disaster and a complete failure of love. And so inside of that, we just never really figured out, well, how can we bring conscious completion to our intimate relationships, or to really any relationships for that matter?
I mean, why do people, and just so people listening know, you're a marriage family therapist, right?
Yes,
You've been doing this for 20, 30 years, and you've been teaching hundreds of thousands of people all around the world about, relationship advice and all this good stuff. So you've got some great wisdom as a licensed therapist, but also with your own experiences. So I think that's where we learn the most from our own experiences, because you're divorced as well.
Yes.
And you had to figure this out for yourself also.
Well, and let me just say, I'm also the author of Calling in the One,
yes,
right?
yes.
Which came out in 2004, and which has sold hundreds of thousands of copies. And
so you called in the One, and then the One.
So I called in the One, and then after a decade, we decided to unmarry.
So it wasn't the One anymore.
Well, he was, though, for that time.
For that time, okay.
For that time. And this goes back to the happily ever after myth, because, when we decided to end our union, I mean, it wasn't, an easy thing to do.
Sure.
And when we made the decision, my prayer was like a little less than pious. It was, are you effing kidding me, God? Like, seriously?
Right.
I'm got all these people who look to me for the answers. And how to find love, and they really open up to possibility in their lives after all sorts of things, and they learn the Calling in the One technique and process, which has worked for many, many thousands of people. But then I'm going to get divorced. So what's that message, and how do I even convey that message? So I know you love to talk in School of Greatness about failure a lot. So that was like a great crash and burn.
Sure. Yeah.
In that moment, it could have really been a disaster.
And you were the woman that was like, I'm calling the One. I'm teaching you all how to do it, and now I'm essentially failed at calling in the One.
Yeah. Well, and so you know what? I know enough to look at my own feelings and whatever's going on for me, and to see it as reflective of what's going on for all of us. So I have kind of I have a deeply personal relationship, obviously, with my feelings, as we all do.
Sure.
But I also have an impersonal relationship with them, because I'm really interested in the evolution of love in the world. Both for myself and our collective capacity.
Conscious love, yes.
Yeah, conscious love, conscious relationships. So and I'm committed to that. So as I'm going through this, I'm going, wow, this is really common, that when we go through the end of a relationship, we feel ashamed. Where does that come from?
Why do we feel ashamed?
Why do we feel ashamed? Why do we go to, now I'm inferior to be single again, or, I was better when I was, what? Where is that coming from? So I actually started to research that happily ever after myth. And I found out a lot of things about it that were really fascinating to me. One is that it's only about 400 years old. Believe it or not, it was created in Venice, Italy.
No
which,
way.
Us romantics, we're not surprised.
That's funny.
But it was created during a time when the lifespan was under 40, when half the children were dying before the age of 16.
Really? Wow.
Which, is probably a good idea, a better idea to keep families together, to give them the best possible chance at survival. And also there was a law at the time that these fairy tales were created, that a noble person could not marry a commoner. And so people, if you were born into poverty, you were going to die into poverty. There was no hope of ever getting out of poverty. So the happily ever after myth came as an escapist fairy tale for people, because it was right after the Renaissance. So people actually were literate. Even though they had no money, they were literate. And they loved the fairy tales, in large part because of the upward mobility.
Okay.
It was and also it happened in a far away distant land, because it couldn't happen in Venice because there was a law against it. So, it's but then it went to France, and it kind of stuck, and it almost took over our world about what our aspiration for love should be. And we're also kind of collectively in that trance that it actually occurs to us as a failure. if we do not. But look, this is the reality. If you look at the statistics are that the majority of us are going to have 2 to 3 major relationships in our lifetime, which also implies at least 1 or 2 major breakups as well.
Wow.
So it's no longer the norm to meet and marry one
the
person.
one, like 21 when you're in college, and then you're with them for the rest of your life.
Very unusual. I mean, it happens.
Sure.
So I think, like we update our computer programs and our child rearing practices and our diets and our exercise programs. I think we have to update our aspirations around love.
Of course.
And we need to shift from the question of, how we're going to value the union according to how long did it last, and start to ask the question, what did I learn, and how have I expanded my capacity to love moving forward?
So challenging when you're in the relationship and you love someone so much, and they bring so much value to your life and they're so incredible, but something's not working, or you can't give them what they want, or they can't give you what you really want. Yeah. And there's just conflict where you can't figure it out, and you've got to end it, or you've got to evolve it, I guess. Mm-hmm. And, how do we, first off, before you even go into that, because you've got 5 steps to doing that. Okay. How do you call on the one? And how do you know it's the one if you're going to end it at some point? That's the confusing thing.
Well, I think, this is important for us to realize that we live in a very mobile society that values growth and evolution.
Yes.
Right. And in a way, America is kind of torn between these 2 ideals of the stability of family and commitment and devotion. And most of us really believe in that. 90% of us are going to get married at some point in our lifetimes. But we also are a country that was kind of founded upon the ideal of the pursuit of happiness. And we are a creative bunch, and we love change, and we love evolution, and we love, personal growth and development. And those 2 things are not always the best bedfellows. So in a perfect world, we all grow together, but different people have different callings, and different people have different aspirations to how much they're willing to grow, and how they're going to navigate the tension between just wanting to be, comfortable in life and kind of set in life, or how much you're going to be risk oriented and keep, striving to become your best self. And I think, I think here in the School of Greatness, I can pretty much assume that most of us are the latter.
Yes.
And so it is going to create a lack of stability. It's going to do 2 things. It's going to create, it's going to create a lack of stability that we are going to, and it's also going to inspire us to grow.
Yes.
Right? Because we don't want to lose each other. We want to learn how to stay related. In a way, conscious uncoupling is about that. Because
it's not about losing each other?
No, look, if you have a crash and burn relationship, somebody's got a personality disorder, they're like an addict, they're like unethical with you, they're toxic, you're going to have to
cut it off.
You need to set that boundary. You're not going to be able to do that. But in many relationships, you can transition. Certainly if you have children or if you're business partners, we wanted to kind of wrap in business too, because I think, I've had 2 business breakups in my lifetime that were almost as heart-wrenching as my divorce.
Yes.
Right. They can be very, very difficult to navigate. So so you really don't want to lose people entirely. You want to do things like, one of the things I have people do is to become very conscious of the agreements that you've had as a couple.
As you had as a couple.
As a couple, like you will always prioritize me. You will always rescue me when I'm in trouble. That kind of thing. Or you will always love me the most.
Yes.
I will always love you the most. I will sexual fidelity, that kind of thing. We are people of our word. There was one woman that I worked with who had been divorced 10 years earlier, hadn't seen her husband in 8 years. He was already married to somebody else. She hadn't talked to him in 8 years. She had never been on a date. And when we worked together, it was because she was still, she was Catholic, so she was still kind of covertly keeping her vow of fidelity to him.
Way.
So we have these agreements with each other. And then we have to update the agreements and become conscious.
Yes.
Like, who are you going to be to me now? What are my expectations of you? What are your expectations of me? And when you start, so that's how you kind of evolve a relationship to a new healthy form. But I think you asked me how to call in the one.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much I want to learn.
I know, there's a lot that I have to say.
The challenge is, the challenge is, how do you call in the one, and then how do you know it is the one, and how do you deal with coping with when it's not the one right now, or it's not the right time, or it's not working, that it's not the one anymore for right now? It's just
So they're different questions.
Yes.
So I think how to call in the one is about being very intentional and being more future oriented than past oriented.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of us have, certain things in our histories, in our childhoods. We have certain, dynamics that were happening in our families. And so we have insecurities, or we have beliefs that, I'm not good enough, or I'm not wanted, or men always leave, or those kinds of stories that
I can't trust people, or whatever it is. I don't have faith in humanity or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and so we're kind of like, and then we go to how am I going to have love? And there's like a sense of resignation, like, because it's become an identity. It's become a self-sense. So one of the things we do in Calling in the One is we look and name that identity really specifically according to each person's story. Like if your dad left when you were 5, what did you make that mean about you?
Yes. I'm not worthy, or that everyone's always going to leave me, or that
when
I get close to someone, they're going to leave.
Right, because inside that consciousness, we're going to show up in ways that then validate that story. And it's so covert, and it seems like it's just happening to us, and we don't see how it's happening through us. One of my favorite stories about this is a woman who was in her 20s, and she was a client of mine, and she met this guy, and they really liked each other, and they were hot and heavy for a few weeks. And then all of a sudden, he stopped calling. Completely. No texts, no calls. 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day, 5 day. By the 5th day, she's like beside herself because her dad left when she was 5 and never came back. Yeah. So in her world, men leave. And so she did what she thought was a great preemptive strike against being hurt. And she just texted him that she met someone new and she's not interested in the connection anymore. Like that to her was her way of getting her power back.
As opposed to just having a conversation or reaching out and not making assumptions. And just saying,
she just
can we hang out again? Or
she was so in her assumption. So anyway, 2 years later, she met him at a club and found out that he had been taking a break because he was like seriously thinking about asking her to be in a long-term committed relationship. And then he had to go back to certain women and close things up with them.
Oh my goodness.
So he was like distracted, ending these other relationships.
And trying to make sure it was the right thing. Wow.
Sabotaged herself.
Wow.
So in Calling in the One, we make that conscious. And then we go back and say, what's the deeper truth?
Yeah.
Well, your dad left, but not every man will ever leave you. And probably if you learn some relationship skills on how to navigate difficult conversations, you'd have a higher chance of staying together.
Right.
Right?
Exactly. So, and maybe they will leave you again. But not everyone will.
But not exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you can't say, well, see, I'm right now because this person left, or they were interested and then they left. Like, that's called dating. You know
it is called dating. I say that to people all the time.
It's called, they don't have to make a decision in the first 2 weeks or the first 2 months to be with you or not.
Exactly.
It's called getting to know someone and seeing where it goes.
Right.
It's not like you're not good enough.
Right.
Maybe it's just not a good fit or the right timing, or maybe he's into someone else, whatever.
So I get people, I kind of help people to wake up out of that trance and get into a place of real possibility, like the recognition that you actually have the power to influence what comes your way and what doesn't come your way, and get into a sense of possibility, and then begin to live into a vision and start to align with that vision and live in integrity with that vision.
Sure.
So that you're not like living your neurosis, you're kind of living. And, the thing about having these, a lot of us have been doing our work and we kind of know our issues, quote unquote, backwards and forwards. But there's something different about actually even giving up the right to have a certain conversation. Right? So you can like sit in therapy for 5 years and talk about men always leave me, or you could have a moment where you say, it's not actually true. It's the story of a 5-year-old. This is what's actually true. And that's going to require me to show up in a different way. And I need to start showing up now in integrity with the future I'm committed to creating.
Of course.
Because Calling in the One is not about necessarily, finding the guy. It's about becoming the woman that you would need to be, or becoming the man that you would need to be in order to find that partner.
Yeah. I had another friend of mine who's does a lot of relationship work as well. I was like, what's the best way to find like a great partner? He said, create a list of everything you want out of that person, everything you want from them, and then go be that yourself.
Oh, yes.
And I was like, oh man, that's strong. If you want them to be funny and attractive and outgoing and adventurous and successful, then you've got to be all those things.
Yeah.
You can't just be half those things and expect someone else to give you more value than you're bringing to the table. Really, I mean, you've got to show up in a powerful way.
Definitely.
So
that's it.
I was like, that is strong.
That's it. And the other thing about Calling in the One, I mean, you're a man of very clear mission.
Yes.
And a lot of folks who are here with us today are very clear mission people. Yes. So you really need to find, you need to be living your mission, and you need to find someone who's sharing your mission.
Sharing it or supporting it.
sharing it or supporting it. But even the support needs to be, this is my contribution to that vision.
Yes. And if it's taking away from the vision, it's really challenging.
Because if somebody doesn't actually have that same value system and they're just kind of rah, I'm not going to get in the way. Like, you're going to go create a family, then you're going to create a home, and then you're going to have kids maybe. And, and if they really have like a traditional value system, they're going to be like, oh, you're out, running around talking to people again? No, you should be home with the kids this weekend.
That's a challenge,
So you really do, I think you have to find a mission partner if you really want to go all the way. And also to maximize the potentials of the connection. I mean, that's the ideal. And then you know what? We human beings seem to make it work in all sorts of funny configurations. And every single relationship is unique to the people who are in it. And relationships will inspire us to continue to grow if we're really committed to maximizing the potentials of each connection.
Of course.
And if you want to learn more about mastering relationships, then make sure to check out this video right here.
Till death do us apart, when de facto, for the majority of couples today, it's till love dies, not till death do us apart.
That's when we divorce. We break up, when love dies.
Yes.